And welcome to the State of Purple. It is game day. Minnesota Vikings game day, week 14. Minnesota Vikings at the Detroit Lions. And we've got a good game ahead of us and a little bit to talk about as we preview a little bit up to the injury release. The injury report will be out at 10:30. We're going to walk you up to that point as I try to get my kids quiet in the background. Apparently, I have the wrong TV show turned on. Imagine that. But we're going to roll up to the front of the game. The injury report will come out. He's Jack Day. I'm AJ Mansour. And the Vikings are in Detroit this weekend to play a dangerous Lions team, Jack.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one. I don't know. I know in my lifetime there have been some very good matchups between both of these teams, but I don't know how often they were supposed to be good games, actually. I think they turned into one that comes to mind. I can vividly remember Golden Tate scoring. I don't know if it was an overtime or at the end of the fourth quarter, but there was a Golden Tate touchdown where he kind of flips into the end zone and you can see Harrison Smith with his back turned running after him. There's been some good games, obviously. They play each other twice every year, but I'm really looking forward to this one. And I don't know if it's because I'm an offensive-minded when it comes to football. I enjoy watching offensive football a little bit more than defense. And quite frankly, I don't know if we're going to see any defense play today.
Yeah, two teams that do not thrive on the defensive side of the football. Jack, there is the Amon-Ra St. Brown game. There are, it was all the way back, I think, in 2017 maybe, but the back-to-back Prater walk-off field goal games. So these games get weird. I guess that might be the best way to say it, is we don't know exactly what to expect from them. But what we do know what to expect during the holiday season, Jack, is great quality content and great quality goods, Minnesota sports-inspired goods from our friends at SodaStick, who present this podcast, sodastick.com. You can head over there right now. Get this hat right here. Jack's got the hat. Jack's got a T-shirt on right now, hooked on a Thielen. You have an opportunity for the loved one in your life that loves Minnesota football, Minnesota baseball, Minnesota sports in general, Minnesota sports-inspired goods, and you can get 15% off right now. Promo code KFAN at sodastick.com. Head over there right now, and you run out of time. 2 weeks from today, Jack, right? 2 weeks from today? Yeah, 2 weeks from today is Christmas. So you have 2 weeks to go to sodastick.com, put that promo code KFAN in there, and get that amazing gear for your family. This is an interactive show. It is game day. I'm going to get this one up on the screen from Nomad. Nomad says Skull. He also says Gritty Time. He's getting the emojis. He's watching on YouTube. Gary Knott, let's Skull. Seal the deal. Today's King of the North, Bebe. Gary Knott watching on Facebook. Thank you for joining us. If you have some comments or thoughts on today's game, throw them into that chat. And if you're listening to the podcast version of this, great to have you. Remember to subscribe, and you'll never miss an episode of the State of Purple podcast. Today's game, Jack Day. A dangerous Detroit Lions team. They are hot. They are on a winning streak of how many? Do you know?
I think I want to say it's like 4 of the last 5, with the only loss coming on Thanksgiving to a very good Buffalo team, obviously.
Okay, so they're playing good football. This is the team we thought we were going to see at the beginning of the season. Remember back to the first matchup with the Lions. They came into that game the leading scoring team in the league. It was after that game. That game was the walk-off KJ Osborne touchdown, heroics down the stretch for the team to get back into it, the Vikings, that is. And then the wheels kind of fell off for the Lions for a little bit, but they have reconfigured. Dan Campbell has gathered this team again, and they're cooking. This is not a team that you can take lightly. Jared Goff, a dangerous quarterback. Who thought we would ever say that?
Yeah, not me. And on top of this, it's a great time to be a Detroit Lions fan. I think Dan Campbell has that program moving in the right direction. And on top of it, that Rams pick now is going to be potentially a top 5 pick. So there's a legitimate chance. They've loaded this team up. They've built the trenches up. They drafted Aiden Hutchinson, who I'm excited / worried to watch against Blake Brandel today. But nonetheless, they're building that team up in the right ways, and they're going to have a top 5 pick in what is arguably one of the stronger, I think at least in the last 2 seasons or last 3 seasons, one of the stronger quarterback classes. So there's a legitimate chance that they're going to go into next year's draft and solidify this team with the quarterback of the future, a true franchise building quarterback, which I don't think they see Goff like that. I know he's playing good football, but I think he's more of that bridge type quarterback. But I think the things, did you have something to say on that before I? rant on
No, I
something
mean,
else?
I agree with you. I don't think he's he's more than a bridge quarterback, but
Yeah.
you still need to plan for the future. And if you have an opportunity to have, a high draft pick that you got from another team, and a mid round pick that was your own, you have this opportunity then to find somebody in a quarterback class. You've been talking about this class for 2 years, Jack, a deep quarterback draft class, to find somebody who could be for the future, and you're planning for the future. I heard yesterday somebody was talking about the last two draft classes for the Detroit Lions. They're basically all active and all participants and all doing really well. So the from general manager on down, they've made good decisions. They've putting things together. Dan Campbell has this team buying in. You have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's one of the best wide receivers in the league right now, let alone period this season. You have a young rookie wide receiver who we'll talk about, Jameson Williams, who's coming out. DeAndre Swift is now healthy. Jamal Williams is like one of the leading scorers in the league. And you mentioned Aiden Hutchinson and that defense and what they can do too. This is not the Detroit Lions team that the Minnesota Vikings have dominated for 20 years.
Yeah, and it's even another pick that rings a bell or comes to my mind when we were just talking about is Penei Sewell too, is another blue chip caliber. I think he's their starting right tackle, if I'm correct on that. But long term, I think he could potentially switch sides because he was a left tackle at the University of Oregon. But I think the storylines in this game, it seems like there's just so many storylines that follow this Vikings team throughout the season. And this is another one. And it gets a little bit juicier now because of a name that we haven't even mentioned today. TJ Hawkinson, this is his first time playing his old team. And it's going to be a different game than the last one we saw. I'm doing a DraftKings lineup today, and I have Kirk Cousins, Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, and Amon-Ra St. Brown all in the same lineup. So I'm just completely stacking this game. It's the highest over-under for a reason. It's going to be very entertaining.
51 points, right?
I think it was up to 52 when
52?
I looked this morning. So the money must be coming in on the over. And if I was a betting man, or if I was in a state that legally let me bet, I think that's where my money would be as well. But I'm really looking forward to this. And I wanted to talk about that DraftKings aspect because I was looking at all the points from the last time these two teams played, and they held Justin Jefferson to like 4.4 fantasy points. Justin Jefferson, they had bracket coverage on him all day long, but that was before the Vikings had a top 5, top 6 tight end on their roster that Detroit so nicely traded to them. It's kind of been a weird year with Detroit and Minnesota. They've kind of been helping each other out on, obviously the wide receiver you were just talking about with Jameson Williams. I think that's a wide receiver that could potentially be a superstar for that team moving forward. And they already have Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think this is a game where Vikings fans and Lions fans alike both just need to get their popcorn ready and be ready for some fireworks, because I think this one's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be a fun one. Intra-division trading was the theme in the NFC North this year. You had the opportunity for the Packers to get Christian Watson, and he has blown up. What is it? 8 touchdowns? I had this written down. It's in my article that I posted. 8 touchdowns over the last 5 weeks or something. Just crazy. Highest scoring player in fantasy football over that period of time. You have the intra-division trade with the Minnesota Vikings and the Lions from 32 to 12 or 30, whatever it was. They moved way up, all the way up to number 12 to get that pick and take Jameson Williams. It wasn't a direct slight at the Vikings not believing in Jameson Williams, but Dan Campbell is the kind of coach who could twist anything and really motivate a kid saying, hey, they didn't want you. They traded out of that spot. They didn't care enough about you to take you at number 12. We wanted you. We came up and got you. Hasn't done much, right? Last week was the first week he was active. I think it was 8 snaps. 4 of them were running plays, had 1 target, and then he couldn't reel it in. I think it was a sideline catch. It just wasn't a great opportunity. So you have this player who everybody's super excited about. Would have been the number one pick, the number 1 wide receiver in last year's draft had he not torn his ACL in the national championship game. He's super fast. People were freaking out over this video from Lions practice of him warming up because he was looking so fast compared to some other players that were on the football field. A dominant over-the-top threat potential, right? This is all potential. But what this does have, Jack, is the potential for Minnesota Vikings fans to lament this trade, and it could debut, he could splash today against the Minnesota Vikings. Do you think that he'll be more of a part of the game plan this week? And, right now that Lewis Cine was the pick that they ultimately got. They traded a couple more times, whatever. But do you think that Vikings fans will be quick to regret this one if he shows up today?
Oh, Vikings fans will. You just have to log on Twitter. They'll let you know if Jameson Williams has a good game. You don't even have to watch a game because you will see it on Twitter. I can promise you that. But I think we will see more of him. I don't know if it's going to be all of a sudden he's going to come in and it's going to be 40 snaps, but it seems like, I mean, you said it was 8 snaps last week.
Yep.
I would imagine that's going to go up and up and up until he's a focal point in that offense because, like you said, he brings a different element to that side of the ball for the Lions. With Amon-Ra St. Brown can virtually do whatever he wants. We say this a lot, or I say it a lot with tight ends, but inside of the 20s, he's a very good wide receiver where, hey, Vikings fans, cover your ears, but he can run crossing routes and he can burn you with his speed too. And he will let you know it. This is kind of where it almost feels like we're turning into a Detroit Lions podcast with how many positive things we're saying about this team. But I think he was a 4th round pick and he knows the name of every single wide receiver that was drafted in front of him, which I think they did a story on him last year, like ESPN or something. And he sat down and he was just off of his memory, he was naming all of the receivers that were drafted before him. So, like I said, I'm excited for this one. I'm getting a little bit off topic because I'm getting that excited. I'm just excited to watch a really good football game today.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is Lions team is one that I wish wasn't in our division because they'd be a very easy team to get behind and cheer for, and kind of on a fantasy football world and just in a general like good feeling world, get behind this team and want them to succeed after years and years of toiling and not being able to do it. You mentioned earlier TJ Hawkinson and the threat that he has become for the Minnesota Vikings, immediately becoming one of the top tight ends because of the frequency and the volume that he gets. But he also gives this team another dimension. Now, I never got the idea that Hawkinson had ill will towards the Lions, but you hear from some of the comments that come out that, didn't know what winning 2 games in a row felt like, or winning on the road, or, these sorts of things that he kind of just throws out there. You get yourself up for a game like this, whether you enjoyed your time in Detroit or not. You're going back to a place where it didn't work out. Maybe they didn't feature you the way that they thought that they were going to feature you. They picked you 7th overall, I think it was, so really high. But it just didn't work out. And you want to prove to them that, the grass is greener on the other side. Do you think that there's a big game on hand for Hawkinson today?
I think there's a big game on hand for a couple players on this offense, and I think you can just throw a dart and land, and that can be your bold prediction for the day. I do think TJ Hawkinson's going to be a focal point of this offense today. There's been so many revenge games for this Vikings team. It seems like every single week there's a player that played for the team prior that they're playing, and I think this is going to be a big one for TJ Hawkinson. And on top of that, this is kind of what I was saying earlier about that Justin Jefferson game where they kept him in check. That's because they were able to do this bracket coverage. I don't think teams are able to do that anymore because of TJ Hawkinson. TJ Hawkinson, whether or not it shows on the stat sheet today, if the Vikings win, TJ Hawkinson is going to be a huge reason for the win, in my opinion. And whether or not that's 100 yards and a touchdown, or if he's in line blocking for most of the day, I think he's going to be a huge factor for this team. And I didn't wear this shirt by accident today either. We can get to bold predictions later in the show, but I have another one for you here in a little bit.
Yeah, we'll do that. We're walking you up to the release of inactives, and the Detroit Lions inactives have been released. We'll go about 5-10 more minutes here, Jack. But for the Detroit Lions, look at scanning real quick. No big surprises here. Guard Coyote Awasika, who I believe is actually from Maple Grove, Minnesota. Coyote Awasika. I have some friends that are friends of his, actually. Linebacker Derek Barnes, defensive lineman Michael Brockers, center guard Evan Brown, defensive lineman Austin Bryant, quarterback Will Harris, and wide receiver Tom Kennedy are your inactives for the Detroit Lions. Scanning Twitter real quick. I don't see the Vikings out yet, but as soon as those come out, we will get it. There are some questions surrounding Harrison Smith of all. Okay, here it is. Here it is real quick. It just came down, and Harrison Smith is officially inactive. Ooh. Inactive. That's going to be a big change for this Minnesota Vikings team. 5 interceptions on the season for Harrison Smith. He is 2nd in the NFL right now. Obviously a big veteran leader, and in a defense that struggles, generally speaking. Also inactive Garrett Bradbury, Christian Darrisaw, Ross Blacklock, and Luigi Villain. That's 1, 2, 3 start. Is Blacklock a starter technically?
He might have been because they put Bullard on the IR now, so he might have been seeing more.
All right, so you have 2 starters on your offensive line that are out. That's trouble. You have 2 starters on your defense that are out. also trouble. This is going to be an interesting game, and this might be, Jack, why you saw the over number continue to rise, or the over-under number continue to rise in Las Vegas. But Harrison Smith, this opens up things for potentially Jamison Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown over the top for this Detroit passing game. They're going to try and take advantage of Harrison Smith not being out there. Safe to say?
Yeah, I do think that's safe to say. And Josh Metellus is going to step into that role. And I do want to say Josh Metellus has filled in admirably the time that he had this year, which was really the first time that we've seen him actually play that safety. He's been a very good special teams player for this team over the last couple of years, but he was solid. And I'm excited to watch him play. I don't think this is necessarily the game where Vikings fans would prefer to see the backup safety come into the game, and probably I guess he was the one getting those reps over Scene anyway, so who knows if Scene was healthy, if it would have gotten to that point or not. But Josh Metellus is he's gonna. I don't know where I was going with that, but like I said, I think he will have himself a solid game. That's not as worrisome to me as Darisaw and Bradbury, and the fact that I'm talking about being worried about Bradbury being hurt, that shows you that he has taken some steps this year. It's a good sign, but I do think I wanted to say this too, because it's frustrating in a way seeing all these injuries. But if the Vikings lose this game and go to 10-3, they're still 10-3 with control of their own destiny. And if you have control of your own destiny and you know you're likely going to be in a playoff position, you want to make sure that you're getting Christian Darisaw, Garrett Bradbury, and all the players across the board, Harrison Smith. You want them healthy for that playoff run. You don't, I guess you can take that a step further. You need them healthy for that playoff run. So I think they're doing the right thing and being cautious and not trying to rush these players back out onto the field, even if they might be able to go.
Right, and both, if you check Twitter right now, the beat reporters are basically saying that's the same thing. Harrison Smith and Garrett Bradbury were listed. I'm sorry, Harrison Smith and Darisaw for sure were listed as questionable, and Bradbury, it sounds like, had a pregame workout that just wasn't up to snuff. So the team is also taking this approach where this game is important. Right, the divisional aspect of it is generally speaking wrapped up. If you win this game, you do clinch the playoff spot. So there is that. But looking ahead to what this team has aspirations for deep into the playoffs and deep into the season, they were, Ben Gessling says the Vikings were opting for caution with Smith and Darisaw, who are both questionable into the game. They did the same with Bradbury after a pregame workout. Austin Schlotman will start. Chris Thomason, same thing. With a big lead in the NFC North, the Vikings are taking no chances with injuries. Darisaw, Smith, Bradbury, all inactive after being listed as questionable. So a smart move, obviously, there for this team. If you're looking at the defensive side of the ball, Jack, we don't talk a ton of defense here, but if the Vikings were going to limit this offense, this Lions offense that can be dynamic, give me the name of one player that they need to hold in check. You don't need to completely shut them out, completely blank them, but it's one player that needs to be held in check and not be able to go off if the Vikings are going to win this game.
I'm going to do two that kind of count as one, and I'm going to say Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift, because this Vikings defense, we kind of know that it can be exposed through the air. When opposing teams get that running game going, it just feels like there's nothing that this defense can do to stop the opposing team. And I will say this too. I do think we haven't even mentioned this on the show. We're getting some reinforcements. I know there's a lot of injuries today, but we are getting a reinforcement out wide on the defensive side of the ball with Cameron Dancer making his return, and he was playing some of the best football that we've seen him play as well prior to his injury. So again, I think the secondary, not having Harrison Smith, that's going to be a concern. But the biggest concern for me with this game is being able to stop the 1-2 punch of, I think Jamal Williams leads the league in touchdowns, if I'm not mistaken.
He's definitely one of the highest. Again, I'm equating this to fantasy because I'm really cramming into my fantasy and right now trying to figure out this last week, get into the playoffs. But he's been one of the highest scoring running backs. I mean, he's a touchdown machine. For whatever reason, the Vikings have a tendency to get down at the 2-yard line, 1-yard line, and then they just hand it off to Jamal Williams and he gets in there. But I wouldn't overlook, DeAndre Swift is healthy now. He had a big week last week. He had an injury that was lingering. He came back slowly. They limited his snaps. That limit is no longer there. So now you have this pass catching back who's a little more dynamic than Williams, but can stretch the field, let's say, between the 20s in a different way. I think that, Jack, one of the keys to this game for the Minnesota Vikings is going to be putting pressure on Jared Goff. It seems a little simple, right? Put pressure on a quarterback and you're going to have good success. But at the end of the day, when you have a guy who can get the ball to a running back, to a tight end, to multiple wide receivers, and stretch the field, put up points, you get him. It's the Tom Brady Buccaneers situation, right? You don't give Tom Brady time to get Mike Evans and Chris Godwin deep. He can't throw the ball, and their offense just doesn't work, except in the final 2 minutes of games, as we've seen. But if you're able to put pressure on Jared Goff, you throw off the timing with Amon-Ra St. Brown. You don't let Jameson Williams get deep over the top. You might force the ball to DeAndre Swift and then dump off a little bit more, but I think it's going to be a key for Zadarius Smith and Danielle Hunter to get an opportunity to get in that backfield, wreak havoc, and then, make him move the pocket, make him get uncomfortable. We saw the effect that had on Kirk Cousins last week with the Jets. We need to do that to a team. I don't know that we have the players that the Jets do. I know we don't, but we have the opportunity to scheme a little bit differently. They blitzed a lot more last week than they did all season. So maybe we're ticking this thing up and giving an opportunity to put some pressure on Jared Goff today.
Yeah, and I think those two things that we just said kind of tie together too, because if you can stop the run game, you can really let Zadarius Smith and Danielle Hunter pin their ears back and go after Jared Goff. And another aspect why both of these teams have been two of the hotter teams in the NFL is I'm not 100% sure on this. I need to go back and actually check on this, but I know the Vikings have done a decent job with this, with winning the turnover battles. Detroit hasn't turned the ball over a ton, if I'm not mistaken. And I think Jared Goff is a quarterback that, like you said, if you can negate that running game and get some pressure to him, we know Jared Goff is a quarterback that will make mistakes and potentially turn the ball over. And that's going to be huge for this defense because we know that this defense will allow some yards. And the only thing that's been saving them throughout the season has been timely, or they've created some really timely turnovers. So they're going to have to find ways to do that. And quite frankly, I don't like the Vikings' chances in this one if they're going to let up 100 plus, 120 plus rushing yards to that running back tandem.
Well, let's not do that. Let's just make that not happen. Right? I mean, easier said than done. But at the outset of this game, you have an opportunity to set the tone. This is a game where I would say you win that coin toss, you opt to receive. The Vikings did that against Dallas, and it didn't work out because they fumbled that ball in the first drive, and it ended up being, a double negative for them. They lost the possession advantage in the first half, and you don't have it at the second half, and you gave up points on that first drive. But this is one of those games where it is important to set the tone. I highlighted, 4 similarities between the Vikings' 2 losses this week in a blog I put out. They lost to the Eagles, they lost to the Cowboys, and one of the things that they did was those terribly timed turnovers, right? Turnovers are bad anytime, but the terribly timed turnovers, the first drive of the game against the Cowboys and the first drive of the second half for the Eagles, when you have possession advantage, right? You get the ball first, you can score, but nope, you turn it over and you double flip it. And then you have an opportunity to score first and kind of thwart some of that Eagles rush that they had, that lead that they had. They were moving the ball, they got into the red zone. And then that was that miscommunication between Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins that led to just that perfect interception for the Eagles. Another thing is that scoring first. The Vikings are undefeated when they score first. 8-0 on the season. They've scored something like 56 points on a first point in a game. The opportunity to go out there and set the tone, that's going to be very important for this team. Gets your team amped up, gets your defense amped up, allows them, like you said, to pin their ears back a little bit. If you are in the lead, you can rush the quarterback a little differently than if you're playing from behind and need to maybe be a little more cautious with what you're doing. So this is going to be a fun game, Jack. I haven't checked it today, but as of yesterday, the Vikings were 2.5-point underdogs. How do you feel about that?
I think it's fair now with some of the injuries that are coming out, and just, I mean, there's a lot of Vikings fans that are like pissed off about that. And this team has won 9 one-score games. I don't understand where people can be upset about that. I know,
Jack,
that the Vikings,
how many one-score games have they lost?
0. I see that point as well, but the fact that it's what is it? Usually they say if you're home team, you get 3 points anyways. So they're pretty much
for whatever reason they don't do that anymore. Like they don't say that anymore. Yeah, I mean it was always unofficial, right?
Okay.
Home field advantage. I don't know why, but they have stopped kind of relying on that. I don't know if because fan bases travel better and I don't get it. But they don't give you those 3 points. Now they might give you something under the table a little bit, but it is. I mean, it still isn't. It is an advantage. Clearly, playing at home in the U.S. Bank Stadium is a big advantage, and playing at Ford Field is an advantage for the Lions. But yeah, I don't know why they don't officially do that anymore.
I will say this too. I think this is going to be a hostile environment and potentially one of the hardest environments this team has played in so far this year. I know they played in Buffalo, but man, this Detroit fan base has not had a whole lot to cheer for in the last couple seasons. And they're sniffing around. Like, there's a lot of Detroit fans that think they have a legitimate chance at making the playoffs or making some run towards the playoffs. And I can see why with how they're playing right now. I thought I saw something on TikTok of someone talking about how they had to open up some standing room only seats in Ford Field. When was the last time they had to do standing room only tickets at Ford Field? That's another.
Somebody probably had to teach them what that was, like how to do it.
Or maybe they already knew how to do it because like Buffalo had played there in years past or this
Super
year.
Bowls there.
The Vikings have had to play there when the dome collapsed. Maybe they had standing room only for those games. But I do want to say before we wrap this up, I do have a couple bold predictions. I think I'm going to start with this. I think Kirk Cousins is going to have his best game of the year. I don't think we're going to see him missing the throws that we saw him missing last week. I think he's going to be hitting on those. And like I said, I wore this shirt for a reason. My bold prediction for today's game is Adam Thielen scores a touchdown and goes for over 100 yards, which I think would be his first 100-yard receiving game of the season.
All right, I'm going to give you 2 TJ Hawkinson touchdowns. That'll be my bold. 2.
I like it.
Count them 2. He has 1 so far, I think, for the Vikings. So that's pretty bold. Pretty bold, but I think that it's going to be a focal point here for this team. So awesome. I like this. My worthless opinion, who's watching on YouTube, just chimed in and said this is kind of a low-key playoff game for both teams. I feel that. I feel like
I think more so for Detroit, but I get that.
Detroit has the momentum, right? This is an opportunity where their fan base can say, yeah, we've turned a corner. Right, we're not going to, do the Detroit things that we always do, and then run out of the back of the end zone and get the untimely turnover. Dan Campbell learned from his aggressive fourth down situation in that first game with the Vikings, and said he's going to regret that the rest of his life. Is what he said. This is a learning point season, I think, for the Lions, and this is one of those turning points in that learning season where you have that opportunity to say, okay, we're legit. We beat a 10-2 team. They're not going to ever say that they won 9 one-score games. We beat a 10-2 team. That's what they're going to say. So they have the opportunity to do that. And the Vikings still every week have something to prove, right? To the nation, to whoever. Even after that Buffalo game, they go out and lay the egg against Dallas. They're still trying to prove to everybody that they are a good team, a 10-2 team that has earned it, and they should be taken seriously. So from that standpoint, this is a playoff game. This is a low-key playoff game. I like that opinion, my worthless opinion. That one wasn't worthless. So nice job there. Jack,
we actually do. I saw something. There's a press conference with Dan Campbell, his weekly press conference, where they asked him if he saw the spread, and he made a joke and said, well, we can't actually bet in the NFL, which I thought was funny that he started with that, but essentially said he was surprised that the Lions were favored. And I think that's cool because I have a lot of respect for Dan Campbell. I don't know if you watched all the Hard Knocks or not this year, but he's doing things the right way over there. And the fact that the rest of the NFL media and some personnel in the NFL might not respect this Minnesota Vikings team, but Dan Campbell isn't a coach that is going to look past a team because they're whatever you want to say, whatever the analytics people want to call it. There's too many terms nowadays for me to keep up with analytics, but
right.
He respects the Vikings, and the Vikings have beaten several playoff teams, the entire AFC East. I know Tua wasn't playing, but the Vikings are a good football team, and I think Detroit knows that, and I think that's why they're gearing up for a battle, and they need this game more than the Vikings. I know it's for the NFC North, but it's going to feel like another playoff atmosphere. I can promise you that. And I think, like I said, I think it means a little bit more to the other guys in this one.
Oh, it certainly does. And Jack, as you get your prediction for this game set and ready to share here, anybody who's in the chat right now, drop your prediction in the chat. We'll throw it up on the screen. I want to hear what people think. Are the Vikings going to triumph and win this game over the Lions? Are the Lions going to be this upstart? Is the Vegas betting line right? If you want to share points, go for it. But let me know who you think is going to win, Vikings or Lions. And Jack Day, I want to hear what you think. What's the final score of this game going to look like as in your mind?
It's going to be close, and there's going to be a lot of points scored. I think that's fair to say. But I think If I had to put points on it, I think both teams are going to surpass. I think they both at least surpass 28 points. I think they hammer the over in this one, and I'll go even further. I'm going to say Vikings win 35-33.
35-33. I'm going to do my math real quick. 35-33. Okay, so I'm going to give the Vikings their first win by more than
Look
one.
at that one. That one was close to mine.
Yeah, look at that. Not the first win by more than one possession. I guess it would be, right? No, they have one. They have the Packers game is the only one that they've won over one possession.
You got to make sure you say that a little bit louder, I think. The one win they have is over the
one
Packers.
win that they have is the Packers game. Yes, the Packers game. So I'm going to give them the 30. I like your 35. But that's straight up touchdown. So I'm going to take that down. We're going to go 20. Let's go 31. I'm going to go 31-21. So it's going to be a 10-point win for the Minnesota Vikings. Comfortable down the stretch for the first time all season. I've been pulling them up on the screen here, but let's go through them real quick. Canned laughter has the Vikings down by 10, going into the fourth and winning by a field goal. Aaron Krause, 34.
Is that a last-second field goal? Because I hope not.
34-31 Vikings. Kirk, 325, 3 TDs and no turnovers. Viking Jerome, 28-31 Vikings. So we see a lot of these 3-point games. Mark Bank experience. Vikings pull it off. Some guy named Tom Day says that Cam Dantzler is going to get a pick 6. What does Tom Day know, right? I don't know that bloodline in that family. We've heard all about that. Vikings should win. Worthless Opinion says that. And Dream Chaser says the Vikings are going to win as well. Jerome says Hawkinson has a big game. All right, thanks for taking part in our game day chat. We'll do more of these leading up to the playoffs as people get a little more excited about Vikings football. But again, thank you to Soda Stick for sponsoring our podcast and bringing us to you each and every week a couple times. This literally, Jack, you know the backstory to this, literally could not happen without Soda Stick helping us out and supporting us with some nuance behind the scenes, but this is perfect, and they make this happen, no doubt about it. So sodastick.com, use that promo code KFAN for 15% off your orders. Hurry up, get those orders in this week to ensure that they can be there for the holiday season. I'm not speaking for Soda Stick. I don't know when their cutoff deadline is, but we're 2 weeks out from Christmas, so don't cut it close. Sodastick.com, promo code KFAN, take 15% off. We will see how this game goes. We're a little over an hour away, hour and 10 minutes away from kickoff in Detroit. Should be a fun one. Hopefully PA has his full voice back, is recovered, and can have some fun with this one and give us a lot of good game calls and a lot of he's loose game calls along the way. All right, Jack, we'll see you later, man. Where are you watching? Going over to Dad's to watch?
I'm just watching at home today. We're going to lay low and clean the house a little bit. So
you lay low, enjoy the game, and hopefully everyone who's watching and listening can enjoy the game as well. We'll talk to you next week, hopefully, to talk about the 11-2 Minnesota Vikings. Knocking on wood, knocking on the wood, making sure we don't screw it up and jinx them. All right, see you later. Bye.
Take a little walk to the edge of town and go across the track.